welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with life coach Cindy Chavez. Today is Wednesday, March the 11th, 2020. It's 4 p.m. New York time. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And we're happy to be doing Relationship Wednesdays once again. That's our new theme going forward. It's still Neville Day, of course, but we're just now focusing on the Neville books like we did in the past. And Cindy, we still get messages about, oh, I miss Neville Day. I love what you're doing, but I miss Neville Day. Which is nice, you know. That's how you know people are loving what you're doing. I also wanted to recognize Daniel, who wrote in a really detailed email to us. I mean, so long and detailed that I'm not sure I'd even want to try to read the whole thing. It would probably take the whole show. That's how enthusiastic he is.
Yay!
And he loves the show. I mean, he went through, he listed all these things that he really enjoyed. I mean, I'll read the first part because it kind of gives you an idea of where he came from and how he found us. And I think it's interesting because it's probably in its own way emblematic perhaps of how people find us. Because, I mean, obviously you never really know how somebody's going to find your podcast,
right.
You know, but, you know, you can kind of also infer, especially when you read something like this. So let me just read it to you. He says, "Hey, Walt, my name is Daniel. I have been listening to the show for about a year now, and I love it. I have been a seeker since about 2012 when I realized I was miserable." Yeah, well, that's a good thing to realize. Yes, and that's probably about the time I was realizing the same thing. So good. And he actually Googled how to be happy. I found podcasts from life coaches, and I kept hearing about the law of attraction. The more I heard, the more it just made sense. I then heard of Abraham Hicks and all kinds of teachers. And the funny thing was, the more I learned, the more I got a case of spiritual and emotional hypochondriacism. Every negative quality discussed was something I personally had to deal with. And while the books and things I learned helped me be a better person and be happier, there was always something wrong with me, something to work on and fix. Then I read Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer, and something inside me broke, at least a little. I couldn't make myself listen to self-help life coaches tell me what was wrong with me and how to fix it anymore. He basically helped me realize that I was perfect and had everything I needed in each moment. So I started doing what I liked. I've always been into ghosts and sci-fi, so I started finding ghost story podcasts and aliens, etc. And it's hard to follow here, so give me a second here. I started listening to Motown. Interesting choice. I started listening to Motown, and I just screwed up my own place here, so give me a minute to find where I was. Let's see. I started listening to Motown. I love it. Anyway, at this time, I still believed in the law of attraction and was reading Abraham Hicks books and YouTube videos. But the thought, I wonder if there's a law of attraction podcast, had never crossed my mind until a little over a year ago. I found one that was too soft and woo-woo, and I consider myself pretty out there in woo-woo. It was hard to listen to, so then I found LOA Today, and I heard the banter from you and Alex, and I was hooked. I think I must have not been a vibrational match to your show until then, which makes me sure I've grown into my vibration. Ooh, congratulations on that. You and Alex remind me of me and my wife. Okay. I'll have to let Alex know that. Oh, actually, she knows that. She saw this one. I'm 6'2", the low end of the tall guy spectrum, and a musician also. My wife gets rid of any excuse I throw at her for why I can't. It's frustrating sometimes, laughing out loud. I listen to you destroy excuses like a pro. My wife also has extreme anxiety issues and sometimes OCD. There are things that Alex says that they're almost verbatim my wife. and this is that's like the first quarter rather of this email. I mean, he starts going through all the things that he loves about the show. When he gets to the point where he talks about the show you and I had been doing on Wednesdays, he said that, let's see, where's it start? Doesn't really help. I really enjoyed the last few Neville Goddard books that you and Cindy covered since I've been listening, and I finally made a vignette 40 days ago. Hooray!
Hey.
Neville Goddard was someone I had never heard of before listening. That's pretty cool. And let's see. I guess I wasn't a vibrational match yet. Yeah, that's probably true. And I like Cindy's coaching stories and her personal aha moment stories. They are easy to relate to, and there's always something inspiring to think about. And he just goes on and on and on. I mean, when you see an email like that one, like, wow, we're really reaching people. That's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that he had the idea that kind of just felt like it came out of nowhere about wonder if there's a law of attraction podcast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's how we do it, isn't it? We don't necessarily think immediately, geez, I wonder if I can go find a podcast about this thing I'm interested in. It's not usually the first thought that comes into your mind, but it came into his mind. And I think he was right. He was a vibrational match for it at that point, you know?
Well, that would be true of anything, right? Yeah. And I know when people reach out to me for coaching, I often say, like, how did you find me? I'm just curious, right? Mm-hmm. Did they hear the podcast?
Sure.
Were they referred by someone else? Did they find me on Google? And I was laughing. You said that he had Googled like how to be happy.
Right.
One time I asked somebody how they found me and they said, I just Googled, please help. How do I not be miserable anymore? And they were actually joking, right? But I thought it was so funny. And it reminded me of my own journey of becoming a life coach because I had been studying communication. I had been studying Neville Goddard. Mm-hmm. Actually, Neville Goddard might have been my entree into law of attraction.
Oh, really?
That sounds, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, finding more of the law of attraction stuff. And so I was studying all of this. And then I went through a really tough period in my life. And one of the things that happened during that period is that my father died. And I'm here in Louisiana and he was in California and we had just had a hurricane and there were no flights out. And he actually was in ICU for a while, but I couldn't get there to see him. So I didn't get to see him before he died. It was, of course, tragic. And I was on a flight going home for my dad's funeral and a guy sat down in the seat next to me and he had a book and he sort of hid it. And so we started talking and, he asked about me and I actually was going through a divorce at the time and my dad had just died. And there's just all these things at once, like when it rains, it pours. And I was just, and so we were talking and he said to me, well, I'm kind of embarrassed to even let you see this book that I'm reading. And I said, why? What are you reading? And it was a book about, he said, well, it's a book about how to keep your marriage together. And he said, but I'm not even married. And he said, but I'm engaged. And he said, I had this great relationship until I got engaged. And then everything just sort of fell apart.
Oh, wow.
And so I just started asking him powerful questions because that was something that I did my whole life with people because I've always had the belief that people had their own answers. Mm-hmm. And when my teenagers were at home, I had the house where all the other kids hung out, right?
Okay.
And many of them got really close to me and they would come to me when they were having some kind of problem. And so I felt like I was sort of in a quandary there because I didn't want to be giving them advice. Like they had their own parents.
Sure.
And I didn't know if my advice would line up with their parents' advice. Mm-hmm. So instead of ever giving them advice, I just learned how to ask them questions so that they could come to their own conclusion. And so I did that with this guy on the plane. I just asked him a few questions and we had a really powerful conversation that had an energy around it. I don't know how to really describe that, but when you really feel like you're in the zone, like something's happening here, right? Something's happening. And the last maybe 10 minutes of the flight, he was quiet and the plane landed and people were getting off the plane. And he turned to me and he said, I'm so glad I met you. Thank you so much. I know now that my life is going to be okay and that my marriage is going to be great. And thank you for all the things, for the conversation that we had. And I was just sort of stunned. And, he got off the plane and I sat there. And as soon as I got to a computer, this was like 2009, I guess. As soon as it was 2007. As soon as I got to a computer, I Googled how to help people because I had this aha moment of whatever just happened, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And as soon as I got to a computer, I Googled how to help people by asking questions.
Good one. I like that. Yeah.
And all this stuff about life coaching came up. I had never heard of life coaching before back in, the early 2000s or mid 2000s. I'd never heard of life coaching. And so I was like, life coaching, what is that? So I started delving into that and here I am. Right. So it's like very cool when I hear stories where people say they Googled something that sounds so hilarious. I'm
right?
Like, yeah, no, raising my hand, I did that, and it changed my whole life, right? The answer to the question about asking questions.
Actually, Google is great for that because, I mean, people get afraid that, they're going to ask a stupid question or something like that. You can't ask Google a stupid question. Google will never come back to you and say, that's a really dumb question, Cindy. Why did you type that in?
Well, or when you start to ask the question and it autofills with your question that like 70,000 other people have already asked, right?
Exactly.
Like, oh, right. I thought it was a dumb question. And there it is.
and you add in the fact that Google has, over the years, given us little clues for those of us who are nerdy enough to read their blogs about what people actually search on. And literally every single year, 20 to 25% of the searches done are brand new. No one has ever done them before.
What's the percentage?
20 to 25%.
That's amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes to show, and people, it proves 20 years ago, people would do like 1 and 2 word searches. Now they're doing full sentences and full thoughts and so forth. And so that's why that's happening. You're getting different, word combinations and so forth.
Still really cool to think about that though, to think about the potential and the possibility, right? It's just.
But it really blows out of water the idea that there's such thing as a stupid question because 20 to 25% of them are brand new,
And the other ones have been asked over and over and over. So, yeah.
And they keep returning results. How about that?
Well, Daniel, thank you for that wonderful email. Gosh, we're so glad you're enjoying the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. That's just, I mean, it's not like I wouldn't do the podcast if I didn't have listeners because I've been there, I've done that. But It's so much better when you have listeners who are loving it. That just makes, that's like a chill up and down the spine to hear that kind of a story.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Really, really great. So, I know you want to talk about, at least for a second, about how people can subscribe if they aren't already, since these are the kind of, messages.
It is a setup, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
That's like the ideal segue, really, isn't it? Yeah. So, okay, let's do that. So, absolutely. If you're not yet subscribed, we invite you to become a subscriber. We know for a fact that roughly 85 to 90% of our listeners are already subscribed. That's one of the nice insights that Apple gives us when we look at the Apple insights. But I also know it's true with the other platforms, just that Apple actually has that particular insight in their statistics, which is really helpful. But I mean, if you're not a subscriber, we want you to become part of our family. And it's always simple to do. If you don't know how to subscribe to a podcast, don't worry about it. We've made it easy. You just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. It will actually detect what kind of device you're using. Are you using an Android? Are you using an iPhone? Are you using a laptop? What kind of laptop? Is it a PC? Is it a Mac? It'll figure that out for you. And then it will show you exactly what you have to do for your device in order to subscribe. Daniel, who's my Tuesday, Thursday host with Alex, and is an iPhone user, said he was able to do it in one click. I can't guarantee it'll be one click for you because it's going to be different for every device, but it's going to be pretty easy. And then after that, you get all 5 shows that we do every single week, 5 shows a week, Monday through Friday, that we record at 4 p.m. New York time, including this one with Cindy. So, become a subscriber. And thank you very much to all of you who are already subscribers, because we really do love every one of you. Also, by the way, check us out on YouTube, because when we record these episodes, we live stream them to YouTube. In fact, I'm seeing Jeffrey and Josephine and Nasha and I think somebody else in there in the live stream doing some chatting. So, you can join us there as well. We really appreciate that as well. So there's our promotional announcements for the day.
Hey.
I had something I wanted to bring up to you. It
Excellent.
Ties into a conversation that we had yesterday. We had a special guest on yesterday.
I saw that.
It's a friend of Dan Mangana's. This is Kim Lee Boda, who is one of Dr. Joe Dispenza's team leaders for the workshops that he does.
Yeah, and it was a great podcast.
It was really good. I was enjoying it a lot. And one of the things that, it was the main impetus between me wanting to have her on the program and why Daniel, at my request, brought her on, was I wanted to answer a question about why it is that Dr. Joe's meditations seem, on the surface anyway, to be more effective because of all the testimonials he gets off of them. And so that's what I asked her. And what she said was, well, first of all, she gave me the great disclaimer that she and Dan were basically competing for to see who could disclaim the most. But neither one of them, we agreed as a team, neither one of them are Dr. Joe Dispenza, so we can put that one out of the way.
Right.
But once we put that out of the way, she said, I'm just going to tell you what my experience is. She said her experience is she does the recorded Joe Dispenza meditation twice a day. It's an hour and 15 long meditation. She does it once in the morning and once in the evening. That's 2.5 hours of meditation a day.
I heard that and I was like, but I wasn't surprised because I actually have some of those meditations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to admit that at one point I would get up at early in the morning, maybe 5 o'clock, and I would do one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would try, and then I would go back to bed.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And then I would try to get the other one done in the evening. But it really was, I just couldn't make the space time-wise for it to happen.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I was impressed by, how much time she puts in on that, plus all of what she does during the day to remain mindful and so forth. And I asked her point blank, well, can I conclude then that one of the more effective aspects of what Dr. Joe does is to get you to spend a large portion of your day focused on getting into a better place, focusing on what you like and what you prefer, reprogramming your mind, getting all that negative, that 70% negative that she was describing out of your programming and so forth. Is that daily commitment, large daily commitment, is that part of it? And she thought it was, and I thought it was. I'm curious to know, do you think it is? How important is it to really be committed that way every day?
Well, I think it's sort of a two-part question, because on the one hand, we're talking about her experience with and Joe Dispenza's meditation audios that are specific length. Hour and 15 minutes, I think you just said, or hour and a half. It's nearly 3 hours of the day, right?
Yeah.
Which is a part-time job.
That's right.
So, yes, I think that has to play into it, because I always say, right, if you want me to find out, I can find out where your priorities are, where your energy is, where your commitment is, by looking at your calendar and your checkbook, right? Wherever you're spending your time and your money, and that's it. That's what you're committed to. That's what you're interested in. That's what I think committed is a better word. I like that you use that word. Right? Because if we're interested in something, but if we're committed to it. So I think that's yes. And I also think that commitment can show up in other ways. Commitment to your own brain health, commitment to your own thought processes, commitment to your personal growth can show up in other ways as well, besides 3 hours a day of meditation. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's pretty fantastic.
It's impressive,
you
really.
Pull that off, right? I'm impressed.
Yeah.
But what I think is meditation, and other forms of mindfulness, is that we're opening our awareness. Like sometimes I give a coaching client an assignment, and there's two types of assignments that can happen. Like some of it can be homework that takes up time, like that meditation. Like you're going to meditate for an hour, or you're going to journal for 45 minutes, or right? It's like going to take a certain amount of time. But the assignments I really love, and probably what I do most of myself, is to continually be conscious of what my thoughts are, to open my awareness to where I'm recognizing what my thoughts are around any given thing, so that I can change them in the moment. Right? And so that's my commitment, is that I really want to be aware, because my thoughts are producing my experience.
Right.
With the junction there of thoughts are actually, that I have over and over, become stories that I'm telling over and over, that create feelings that I'm feeling, that probably create even more stories that create my experience, right? So if I can stay on that and be aware of stories I'm telling. So, I mean, I don't think commitment can only show up by being willing to do any specific thing, but absolutely. If you're doing something 3 hours a day towards a certain end, then certainly there's a commitment there.
Absolutely.
A pretty big one.
In fact, we did a promo a few minutes ago about people who commit to listening to a show. I mean, when you listen to the show 5 times a week, an hour a day, that's a commitment. Right. That's a definite commitment of time and energy. And it basically is a way of showing, yes, I am serious about making improvements in my life.
Yeah.
So good on you, listeners. We love you for that.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
Like I have a friend that I know that I know from him working in a restaurant that we go to all the time, right? And we've actually known him for more than one restaurant. And the other day, I asked him a question. You know, I'm really good at asking powerful questions, right?
That's why you get the big bucks, I tell you.
So I asked him a question, and he answered it, and we started talking, and I find out, oh my goodness, like I've known him for a long time. I never knew that he has a side, it's not a job, it's a side commitment. It's something he loves, working with kids, teaching kids art and how to cook and how to dance. And he has like a couple dozen kids that he's been working with. And I found out by asking more questions and being more interested in what is going on here, that he's been doing this for 11 years. And he's been renting a space with his own money to do it.
Wow.
Right? That's a commitment.
No kidding.
Right? I look at his checkbook. I look at his time. Spending hours every week. He's spending his own money.
Yeah.
That's where his heart is, right? That's his commitment. So,
no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really cool. We do have a couple of questions from the live stream, so let's go to those.
Excellent.
Josephine is asking, do you know of the Orpheus and Eurydice myth? I like to look at it as an allegory of clingy attachment to romantic relationships.
I can't pull that myth out of the top of my head. I do study a lot of mythology, and so I know I've probably heard it, but I have a handful that I'm really well versed in, and that's not one of them.
That's not one of them. Okay. Well, she also has a second follow-up, so let me ask the follow-up. That may help. She says, what are your thoughts on scripting when it comes to relationships?
Oh, I love scripting. I love scripting. And as far as what she was talking about, clingy relationships, I just will address that first.
Okay.
And that's what happens when we are expecting for our needs to be met by someone else. Right? That's when we're expecting our family members, our spouse, our friends, our boss, whoever, to meet all of our needs. And many people are in a relationship and they are not happy because they have a lot, when our needs are met, we have all these needs as humans, basic human needs and some that aren't so basic, right? And when those needs are met, we feel feelings we would put in the good category. I never categorize feelings as good or bad. I think that they are all valid and useful and important, right? Mm-hmm. But some of them feel good and some of them feel
absolutely
bad.
They do.
So
yeah.
Instead of labeling feelings and emotions good and bad, I often say comfortable and uncomfortable. When all our needs are met, we feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
It is.
The temperature in the room is right. I'm feeling loved today. I've had enough to eat. I got a good rest last night. All my bills are paid. Like my needs are met and I feel great. But on the other hand, if my needs aren't met, I am starving. I didn't get enough sleep last night. None of my bills are paid. I'm not feeling good in this moment. I mean, it really boils down to that, right?
It does.
So when I'm expecting someone else to meet all my needs, then I get needy and clingy.
Yeah.
And what happens when that relationship ends because that person wasn't able to fulfill all of my needs, I'll get in another relationship and it'll be the same because I'll still be expecting. But when you recognize, wait a minute, I am responsible for getting all my needs met. I'm in a fantastic, wonderful marriage. It's the best relationship ever. And it is not on him to make me happy or to meet my needs. Now, here's the caveat with that. It's not on me to meet his needs either.
That's right.
He has to find his own happiness and get his own needs met. However, we are in love with each other. So I am interested in him having his needs. So I do want to help, right?
Yeah, of course.
But it's that neediness that comes from expecting all of that to come from someone else. Okay, now scripting. Let me answer that one.
Okay.
I love scripting. I love it. And I have to say, there's a lot of different ways. I'm curious what Josephine is thinking of when she says scripting in relationship. And I'll tell you why, because two things come to mind. The first one comes to mind is that story that you're telling yourself, right? Like being thankful because you're in a happy relationship and la la la, and being able to tell that story instead of like complaining about everything. And Florence Scovel Shinn, she's one of my old timey New Thought people, like Neville, that I love them both, and they've both been gone from this plane for a while, but I like their writings. And Florence Scovel Shinn said, your ship will never come in while you're bemoaning your lot.
True.
And the way I twist that around for relationship coaching is your husband is never going to turn into the guy you want him to be when you're complaining about everything.
That's right.
Right. So there's that kind of scripting, and then for the Nevillites on the pod that listen, there's that remaking a conversation, which I kind of consider scripting.
It is.
Right? I remember having a conversation that was really painful with somebody who I really care about, and it was short, but it wasn't short and sweet. It was like, ugh. And they said something hurtful, and I said something that I wish I would have said differently. And then I remembered the Neville thing, right? Like a week later.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Like, oh, why did I do this right away? And whenever that conversation would come up into my mind, I rewrote it. So it was a script now. I scripted it the way I wanted it to be. And I would play it that way, where this person said something much kinder and I said something much kinder. And we both came to an agreement that was very sweet, and it was a win-win. So I scripted the same conversation that was around the same thing into like a win-win conversation. And do you know, that conversation actually almost happened word for word.
Really?
Little ways in the future.
Cool.
So it was like, oh, wow.
That's a Neville story right there, because Neville stories always work out that, right. Whatever little vignette is that he puts together, that's what ends up happening. It comes out exactly like the vignette.
I remember the vignette I made where we were celebrating something wonderful. Because remember something wonderful is happening to me now?
Right.
And I made a vignette where we were in a really nice restaurant and we had champagne and we toasted and somebody said Mazel Tov, and we just had a great little celebration. It was very short. All my vignettes are short. And lo and behold, about, 5 weeks later, we were in a restaurant with our rabbi and we were making plans for our wedding. And he said Mazel Tov and toasted us. And I was like, oh my goodness, something wonderful is happening. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious if Josephine has any other follow-up question, if that's what she meant.
Well, she gave us a little background on the story of Eurydice and Orpheus. She says Eurydice was bitten by a snake. Orpheus traveled to Hades to retrieve her. He succeeded by playing music, but didn't follow instructions, and she vanished at the door.
Huh. Okay. You know what I'm going to be reading tonight, right?
Yeah,
right. Serious, because I have one coaching program where we use a lot of mythology in it, kind of a one-on-one. I don't even advertise it. It's something that if it's right for certain people, that's where we go with it. But that myth I haven't dug into, and now that you've brought it to my attention, I guess I'm a vibrational match to it now. That's why you told me about it today.
Well, we were also talking a moment ago about how there's value in showing through your calendar and through your checkbook, so to speak, how committed you are to making change. And when I think about that in relationship to relationships, it occurs to me, if that's probably the one topic. I mean, there are like 3 topics that people ask about the most. There's money, there's health. Those are probably the big 3. But relationships are the ones that people, I think, get the most emotionally wrought about. And so that's what makes me think, isn't it something that perhaps it's almost like a question, how much effort are you putting into, how much time and money and whatever are you putting into making that change if you're feeling wrought about or overwrought about a relationship or relationships that aren't going right or that you're trying to make changes on? I mean, because my impression is, and you got to tell me if I'm on the wrong track here. My impression is if you've got something really strongly emotional going on, you got to kind of really commit to changing that pattern, because otherwise that pattern is going to come on strong. It's been building up over time, and that's why it's so strong in the first place. So you got to kind of put some time in. You got to put time in to really make this thing change in your mindset. Not so much trying to change somebody else, just trying to change what's going on with you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a commitment process, right? To change, any kind of change. And so when someone is committed to changing things, and usually, I wrote a blog post like 10 years ago, and the title of it was, "Have You Suffered Enough?" And the reason why I wrote it was my son at the time was in college, and he said to me, "Mom, why do people stay in unhappy relationships?"
Good question.
And I said to him, because the fear that they perceive, the fear of what might happen if they get out. It's all because it doesn't matter if it's an unhappy relationship or an unhappy job or an unhappy whatever. People stay in one place because they're afraid of change. But when the suffering that they're experiencing in the situation suddenly becomes big enough to where it seems bigger than the perceived change or the fear of whatever's unknown, they usually make that change, right? So when does that happen? It's when we've suffered enough. It's like, right? I mean, we've all had a situation where we said, okay, I can't take it anymore. Something's got to give here. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. That's when people change. They change their relationship, or they leave a relationship, or they leave a job, or something changes because they've suffered enough.
Oh yeah, that's true. In fact,
so the commitment, you asked about time. I wouldn't say, evolution takes a long time, but transformation can happen pretty quickly. Like most of my programs or the 2 programs I have, 12-week programs. That's a pretty short amount of time. And I see major changes with people, miracles. That's a pretty short amount of time when you consider that a lot of people don't show up for that program until they've been suffering for years, or maybe decades, right? Yeah. So yes, it does take time. It does take commitment. It does take action. That's something I could speak to. One of these oddities that yesterday, I think I had 3 people tell me that they wanted to manifest something, and they said, "I do not want to take any action." and it was funny because I wasn't even bringing up action yet. They said it from the get-go. I don't want to do anything. Somebody said, okay. They told me number 1, I asked them the top 3 somethings, and they told me 1, 2, and then when they got to 3, they said, "And I don't want to do anything for this to happen." And they said, "And I know you're going to tell me that I have to do something." I don't want to do anything. And all of the people that said that followed it up with saying, "I've manifested things before without doing a thing."
Sure.
And I said, okay. And so have I.
Absolutely. I have too.
Right? However, magic works through mundane channels. So the action, we don't want you to try to action yourself to death, right? It's not about that, but it's about inertia. Movement dissolves inertia. What do you do when you're just so frustrated at the computer? Walt, you've gotten frustrated at a computer before.
Oh, just occasionally, yeah.
Right? So is there some point where you get up and you walk away? And you take a walk? You take a walk.
Absolutely.
You move your body, right? You take a walk because, one of my mentors told me this, Hiro Boga, I love her. And she told me this one time. She said, blow bubbles. Little kid bubbles. Because she said, when you blow bubbles, things are shifting.
Yeah, it's true.
They form and they pop and you're shifting energy. Go blow bubbles. And so my husband went out and bought me 2 bubble wands, and they're in the kitchen.
Really?
And occasionally we go outside and just blow some bubbles if we need to. Right? If we're stuck with a situation that we want to change. So movement dissolves inertia. And this is what I'm talking about when we want to manifest something. take some action towards it. It doesn't have to be big life-threatening action. Just take some action, make a phone call, write something down, get up and take a walk, start researching on the thing. I'm all about taking some action. I know there's a lot of coaches that have nothing to do with law of attraction or any kind of magic or any kind of thought, work that will want you to just take massive action consistently to get towards your goal.
Mm-hmm.
That works too, but sometimes it's exhausting.
It can be, yes. Whenever I hear somebody say what your 3 clients were saying about, I don't want to have to take any action. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly acceptable. Yeah. But I also think it usually comes through as one of 2 things that I think about. One thing that I think about is, well, if you wanted to get from New York to Los Angeles, would you just envision it and then expect it to happen?
I always say that.
That just seems kind of silly to me.
You're getting ready to go, and you are going to go, right? You go out and your car has a flat tire. Do you just say, nope, not going to change it. I'm just going to get in and think happy thoughts. Womp, 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 womp.
Yeah, right.
Like, no, it's like, because we live in a physical world. And sometimes, we have a physical body as well as, like, we have this awesome mind and we have a awesome brain and a wonderful heart, and we can meditate and we can think and we energetically can change things. And we also have a physical body. And so why not use everything you've got?
Exactly. Yeah. I think what it really comes down to for me, because you made the example of when I get frustrated with the computer, and I'm programming, and I can't think of anything that you can do with a computer that is more frustrating than programming, because it's one error after another.
I set you up for that one.
You really did. And what I actually end up doing, it's taken me a while to do it consistently, but I'm starting to do it consistently now. In fact, I followed a practice Dan recommended. He actually programs into his phone every hour to remind himself, stop and get yourself back in the vortex. So I actually did that.
Nice.
I've been doing it for the last week, and I've been making a lot more progress with the programming as a result, because I kept taking time at the top of every hour. Okay, take a breather. What's gone right so far? Hey, oh yeah, something did go right. And within the last 10 minutes, I forgot about it already, but trying to put more energy, more focus, more time, and more attention on the things that are working properly, because it's so easy to sweep them under the rug and keep thinking about, well, that didn't work. 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 Like, oh, you got to reverse that. So yeah, it's really important to take that break. It's really important to notice them. It's really important to take the action, because otherwise that's a hard pattern to break. I mean, you're doing this programming thing and then you're supposed to turn it around without taking any action. Oh, that's exhausting. From my perspective, that's exhausting.
Right. And being stuck is exhausting. It
is.
Right. And so it's a pattern. And so moving, and that's like blowing bubbles,
mm-hmm.
It breaks the pattern. It breaks some kind of pattern. It's a pattern interrupt, right? When you get up and you go, I got to go take a walk. It's a pattern interrupt. Mm-hmm. And things start to shift.
That's
so
right.
In the same way, this is a question that I ask clients that are stuck. And that is, once we get clear on what they want and clear on what might be getting in the way, sometimes it's, what is the next step? And not the next 5 steps, just the next step. And I asked a client that over the weekend, what's the worst case scenario? And she told me, and I said, okay, so if that happened right now, what would be your next step?
Mm-hmm.
Not your next 10 steps, not your ultimate goal. And what was great is that they gave me an answer just like that. Like
nice.
They knew what they said, oh, I would do this. And I said, and then without me saying anything, they said, and then after that, I would do, like, they knew their next 2 or 3 steps actually,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. That's the action. That's taking some action. Things don't get done without taking some action. Yes, it is possible. I have had clients that wanted a husband, and I'm like, I'm all on board with clients that tell me they don't want to do online dating. As a matter of fact, one of my taglines is I help women find their soulmate without online dating.
Oh, cool.
Right? because a lot of people don't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I get that. And I know you don't have to do it to find your soulmate.
Sure.
But unless you want to marry the UPS man, you might have to get out of the house.
Well, if he's hunky enough, you might want to, I suppose. But other than
I know somebody told me, oh, I know someone that married their UPS man. I was like, all right, see? It's like the Abraham Hicks thing that says, if you probably can, if you're focused enough, you probably can go to McDonald's and get a 5-star meal. But it's probably so much easier to just go to a 5-star restaurant and order a meal there. And that's the thing, I think, is that people sometimes think they want to use law of attraction because it will be easier. And then by not taking any kind of action, they actually make it harder.
Exactly. By the way, I love the example of taking what's the next step? Not even taking it, but just asking yourself, what's the next step? Because as a programmer, when you're doing computer programming, that's essential. That's absolutely essential. The thing that will kill you as a programmer is trying to figure out the next 10 steps.
Right. Exactly.
You can spend hours on that and not write a single line of code.
And one of my earliest teachers told me something that always stayed with me. And that is, your next step is easy and obvious and doable.
Yeah.
And if it's not your next step. Sometimes we think, like somebody say, I said, what's your next step? I want to write a book. Well, whoa, because that's a huge project. So, okay, well, since that's your end goal, what would your next step be? Maybe it's deciding when you're going to write it or what you're going to write it about, or taking the step towards some kind of research, or, but it's going to be a small, doable, easy thing.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. And even in those situations, I'm going to go back to the programming because that's what I've been doing a lot of. And so it's kind of, firmly etched in my mind, so to speak. But if I find myself having trouble identifying what that next step is, it's usually because I'm dithering between, should I go after this module, or should I do this module, or should I do this module? Maybe I should do this one. Yeah, but I should do that one. And then I start bouncing all over the place like that. And at that point, when I can notice myself doing that, I finally just have to stop myself, take that break, go blow those bubbles, come back, and then say, okay, just pick one. None of them are wrong answers. Just pick one. We're going to block the others for now. They're going to take care of themselves, and we're going to find that one next step for that one thing. And then I finally write a line of code.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we're supposed to be talking about relationships, but this is applicable to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It is.
Even in relationships, maybe especially in relationships. There's some really simple things. One is getting clear about what you want. And then
really true.
Being willing to take action to make sure that need is met. Right.
By the way, Jenny was really latching on to something you said earlier. She says, regarding having suffered enough, when you realize that you are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah. Right.
That's it.
Exactly. You're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about energy levels before on the podcast, but that lowest level of energy, very, very low level of energy, we sometimes refer to it as victim energy, because when we're there, and we've all been there, when we're there, it feels like everything is against us. It feels like we don't have any choices. It feels like things are never going to change. And at that point, usually we're not at the suffered and we're still suffering. There's a wonderful saying. It says, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And the pain comes because we're wired for pain. It's part of life on earth, right? If you don't believe me, any 1-year-old learning to walk is going to believe me, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And so pain is inevitable, but suffering happens from the stories that we're telling ourselves about the pain. And suffering doesn't have to happen. So when we've suffered enough, when we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's actually a rise in energy level, maybe to the conflict level, which is, I'm done with this. I'm not going to take this anymore. Because we're ready to fight it. We're ready to take it on. Mm-hmm. And then the next level up is the level 3 energy, which is responsibility. And that's when we say, okay, how can I, instead of blaming everyone else, instead of thinking everyone else is at fault, why is the world not delivering to me what I need. It's okay. How do I get what I need? How do I take care of myself? How do I take responsibility? That's an even higher level of energy. The higher we go up the energy scale, the easier things flow to us.
And isn't it true that energy scale is directly related to how we're feeling?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Emotions are all up that scale, and how we feel. And it affects everything. It affects the story that we tell. The exact same thing can happen to me as happened to you. And if we're in different energy levels, we will have a completely different story about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Very true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, I kind of skipped over a comment that Jeffrey made, and I want to tell him I appreciate it. He says I'm looking younger. I appreciate that so much, Jeffrey. Thank you very
since
much.
Yesterday? Because you've been working on it, right?
I've been working on it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm trying to make it more and more my thing. It's actually part of my mirror work now. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Why not?
It's part of what I call hippoing, which Louise and I came up with that term, and I think it's really valuable. I mean, I kind of got teased about it by both Kim and Dan yesterday because they said, "Well, I don't have anything more I need. I like it all. I've got everything I've got." But but I like the idea of stretching my mind.
We all have everything we want. You know that, right?
Oh, I was going to give him a hard time about that going back. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I like the idea of stretching my mind and stretching my imagination that way because it makes it easier to deal with situations like what you were talking about earlier, where you are trying to imagine a conversation, for instance, playing out the opposite of what it actually did.
Right.
If you don't stretch your mind on a regular basis, the first time you run into that particular kind of situation, it's impossible. That's not what really happened. I can't turn that around like that. But when you stretch your imagination and basically use it is what you're really doing. When you're using it on a regular basis, then you come upon a situation like that where you do want to do the rewrite, and oh my God, it's easy. Mm-hmm. So talk about staying away from stuff because I don't want to have to work for it. Versus now we've taken the same situation and turned it into something fun because we've been practicing.
And this is it. And I know I feel like I say this a lot, but it's so important. Is that the intended goal of this process is the feeling that you're having during the process.
Yeah.
Right? When I teach people this, I'm always careful, or I hope I always remember to say, because I teach people sometimes actual communication techniques to have conversations with people, especially conversations that they are avoiding because they think they're going to be difficult. My husband says the 4 scariest words on the planet are, "We need to talk." And somebody asked me, I told them about a conversation I had, and they said, "Oh, was that hard?" And I said, "Not really." And they said, "Oh, you're so good at this." Well, no, I've just been willing to do it, right? Just because I said it wasn't hard didn't mean I really wanted to have these conversations.
Sure.
But what I always teach people is when you go into this conversation using this process that I teach, your goal is to just have the conversation. Because sometimes people in the early days when I was teaching this, people would come back and say, "Oh my gosh, it was so wonderful. And like everything I wanted to happen happened and we got a good outcome as a win-win." Okay, awesome. But then some people would come back and say, "It didn't work. I tried it and it didn't work." They still didn't want to talk to me, or they're still angry or whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. And I would say, "Oh, no, wait. You're judging the process by whether you got what you were asking for, when really the process is about just using the process and the feelings that same with scripting of any kind, same with rewriting the conversation. And it's not that I don't want you to get a better outcome in the future. Of course I do. But what I know is it's like that old Buddhist saying says, you can't make it happen. You can let it happen.
Yes.
You let it happen to make it happen. It won't happen. So stay in the present moment, rewrite the conversation. When I did it, the time I was telling you about that had such a great outcome in the future, I kept dwelling on this conversation. It felt really bad to think about it. Like I kept remembering it. I kept replaying it over in my mind. It kept making me have a knot in my stomach because it was just not the way I like to handle conversations, right? So when I rewrote it, all I would think about is how good it felt to be in the conversation the way it was now.
Mm-hmm.
To hear this person I cared about say these kinder things to me and more understanding things to me, and to hear me say back to them things that were better and kinder, right? And I thought, oh, this is sweet. It feels so good. I wasn't really intending it to have any effect. I just wanted to feel better about that conversation in the moment, so I just changed it. It did have an effect in the future. But when you go into it attached to some future outcome, that's where you start to get into trouble, right? Because attachment is resistance.
It's not only resistance, it's also what makes it so tiring. I mean, we were talking, what was Jenny's quote? That having suffered enough, you realize that you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Well, I guarantee that's a great way to become sick and tired, is to attach.
Such resistance, attachment, aversion, right? All of that. Oh my goodness, it's such an energy drain.
It really is.
Big energy drain. The best way to not have the energy drain is just to tell the truth.
Well, there's a dangler. We'll just leave that one hanging out there for a while. Uh-oh. Tell the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Well, people are often afraid of the truth because of what they think it's going to feel like or sound like. And when you get used to just being, you can tell the truth and still be kind. That's the thing I'm reminding people all the time. I had a client say to me the other day, we got on the phone and we hadn't talked for a week, and I said, how are things going? And she said, I've been repeating to myself all week, I can tell the truth and still be kind. I can tell the truth and still be kind.
I love it.
Like, awesome. Excellent.
That's great. That's scripting.
Yeah. Right.
That's ultimate scripting. And it wasn't even a long script.
No. I don't, my scripts and my vignettes are pretty short. My all-time favorite money mantra.
I do. I love it too.
Right? I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. I think it's like not quite 20 words, right? That's the long one.
Yeah, the short one, if I remember correctly, was I feel rich, but yes.
I feel rich. I love money and money loves me. Yeah.
Yep.
So, I like to keep them short, vignettes, affirmations, all of it short, because then you can just repeat them and they get in there. They get into your head, into your bones, into your heart.
Yeah. And what's really cool about them? I mean, people are always looking for affirmations, right? You see it all the time. People on Facebook, anybody got any good affirmations or whatever. It doesn't matter what the affirmation is. What matters is, does it resonate? Does it feel good to you? That's all that really counts. Because if it does, then my God, what are you doing not repeating it?
Well, if it doesn't feel good, then it's not achieving the purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's working against it,
and,
actually.
And again, here's where what I just said a minute ago is going to make sense. When we tell an affirmation and we don't believe it and it doesn't feel good, it becomes an energy drain.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not telling the truth.
Yeah. Because
anytime we're not telling the truth, it's an energy drain. So that's why it's so important. And sometimes we tweak an affirmation. If an affirmation doesn't feel good, you can tweak it a little bit and say, I'm in the process of. Right? Like if I had an affirmation that said, one of my favorite friends and colleagues, her affirmation is, I'm a brilliant coach in high demand. And she is. Right? So if I were to say that, and actually I love that affirmation too, and I say that one too, and it feels good to me. But if I were to say it and think to myself, oh, but I'm not, right? Maybe as a very new coach, I didn't feel like I was quite brilliant, and I didn't have any demand yet. So saying I'm a brilliant coach in high demand felt kind of like a lie.
Right. Sure.
Then I would just say, I'm in the process of becoming a brilliant coach in high demand. I'm learning to be a brilliant coach in high demand, right? Like tweak it a little bit so that it can be true. Then you'll find the power in there because it won't be an energy drain. You won't be trying to convince yourself of something that feels disingenuous.
I'm reminded about when, before we did the Neville books, we did a few other books, including Abraham Hicks' Money and the Law of Attraction. And that was one of the themes in that book, that so often people feel like that pivoting is about taking whatever that thing is that is happening that you don't like and you want to change, and trying to pretend that the opposite is true. And the point they were making is, no, it's not about trying to make the opposite something that you like and feel good about, because that's not your job. Your job is to find what does feel good. Your job is to commit to that.
Or, you could just recognize that part of you actually really does like the poverty that you're in or the struggle that you're facing, and just learn how to approve of it. It works.
Yeah.
It works because, see, disapproving of our emotions and our feelings and our situation feels bad.
It does.
Right? And so all we're looking for is just to feel better about it. Release all that judgment. When we judge our feelings as bad, then we're guilty. Guilty as charged. Just judge ourselves. And when we're guilty and we're judged, then we create some kind of punishment that follows. And usually it's just more of the same bad feeling. So when we can just let go of all that and realize that all the things we're feeling, they're all valid, they're all important, they're useful, they're fine. Just go ahead and approve of those things. It's like a load gets lifted off. And if we can go the step further and try to enjoy those things, then now we're in enjoyment. That's a better feeling.
Absolutely. It's reminding me of the conversations that I've had with you and with others here on the show about comfort zones. Because comfort zones are a great way to kind of come at many of these issues that we discuss and have a better understanding of what's going on. But the interesting thing about a comfort zone is that comfort zones are comfortable. Some of the time we actually like being in the comfort zone. Other times being in the comfort zone is uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's really what the difference is. Does it feel good to be there, or does it not feel good to be there? Right. Which is it?
Comfort zones sometimes are really uncomfortable.
Yeah. They really are. Yeah. But other times they're comfortable. I mean, Alex actually admitted that to me recently. She says, I know I'm in a comfort zone. I like it here in the comfort zone.
Well, then, awesome.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Then it's a great place to be. You're going to just keep attracting more things that make you comfortable.
That's right. Yeah. So nothing wrong with that. That's good stuff. Yeah. I mean, relationships are, like I said before, the big challenge I think with them is the emotional power. Especially when they're going wrong and we're trying to understand what's going wrong and we're trying to figure out what to do. And, maybe we ask a friend or we talk to a coach or we post on Facebook or whatever, but we're trying to find some way to deal with this really, really painful thing.
Yeah.
And I know we've all done that. Yeah. That is a place of, it's a place of discomfort for one thing, but it's also a place of confusion. Because, all the things we're talking about here, we've been talking about some really great strategies here about how to, make changes, how to be on that better growth path and so forth. But when you're faced with one of those really difficult, painful, even emotional challenges that are just kind of dominating you, that the 70% negative tape is actually closer to 100% and is playing day and night and you can't get away from it. And nothing you do seems to make any difference. It all seems to get worse and worse and worse. We know what that negative vortex is like. That's a very, very uncomfortable place to be in. So I'm going to kind of finish this off by asking the same thing that I asked toward the start there. So what's the strategy? I mean, we've got some good strategies out there, but what do you do when you're
the first thing you have to do is what I just talked about, and that is that stop judging. See, because when we're feeling so awful, when we have our heart broken, we often start to tell stories that we did something wrong, that there's something wrong with us, right? We have to let go of that first and recognize that our feelings are a miracle and that they're all okay. And then we move on towards healing ourselves from whatever the wound was. And that's something I can't answer in 15 seconds.
No. But that's what the whole show in between was about how to deal with all that stuff.
Yeah. So that's the strategy, is first to let yourself feel all the feels and not without judgment. Stop judging all that. Stop judging yourself.
Those feels really are key. They're important. I saw somebody posting, the usual kind of thing on Facebook, and I don't remember what the nature of what she was writing about was, but it had, I know what it was. Well, this was an interesting one, actually. We might be able to cover this one in 15 seconds. Let's see what you think about it. She's an Abraham follower. She's been doing law of attraction for, I think, a decade, something like that. and she's really into it. But just recently she started freaking out over the realization that she's going to be around for an eternity. And it was scaring her. It was really scaring her. Yeah. And so I asked her, so what does that mean to you? How does that feel to you? And I don't remember what her answer was, but she gave me what the answer was. And it was a little 2-word answer. I said, good. Now expand on that. Talk about what is that feeling that you're feeling there?
Yeah.
Along the same lines of what you're talking about here, that when you bring that feeling, it's amazing when you bring feelings out and you just kind of lay them out on the table and kind of study them for a little bit and talk about them with yourself or with others, they lose their power.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If we're willing to feel them.
Yes.
It's the resistance to them and the judgment of them that causes so much, suffering. Suffering. Don't want any of you to suffer.
Enough of that long, hard suffering. We're done with that. So, anyway, this is great. As usual, thank you very much for all the insights. I mean, I just love, you're actually one of the easiest co-hosts I have because I say something to you. You're kind of like a Joel. I say something to you and then I'm done for the next 10 minutes.
I know what that means. I talk a lot.
No, it means you have a lot of good stuff to say. And that's
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, yeah, thank you.
See, when I'm working, I'm doing a lot of listening. When I'm
exactly.
Podcast, you do all the talking.
You got to balance it. That's what it is. You're balancing it off by doing the talking here, so you can listen there. So, good stuff.
I appreciate you. I love being here every week.
We love having you. So thank you very much. Thank you, live streamers, and thank you especially to our podcast listeners as well. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.